This is the 3D Viewmaster booklet, The Coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. The Coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. O God, the crown of the faithful, bless, we beseech thee, this crown, and so sanctify thy servant Elizabeth, upon whose head this day thou dost place it for a sign of royal majesty, that she may be filled by thin abundant grace with all princely virtues. Through the King eternal, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. These words of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Geoffrey Fisher, blessed St. Edward's crown lying on the high altar of Westminster Abbey. His steady hands, moments later, placed the 7-pound golden crown on the head of the 27-year-old Queen Elizabeth, sitting upon King Edward's chair over the stone of Scone. A watchful herald sounded a jubilant trumpet note. A chorus of horns echoed through the abbey, while from the Tower of London, from Hyde Park and Windsor Castle, cannons thundered royal salutes. Church bells rang out, and in the abbey and all over the British Empire, people rose to shout their fervent "God save the Queen." A historic event. The date was June 2, 1953. The place, the Great British Monument, Westminster Abbey in London. The event was the coronation of Elizabeth, by the grace of God, Queen of this realm and of her other realms and territories, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith. Queen Elizabeth II is the 5th Queen to rule England and the 38th English monarch to be crowned in Westminster Abbey. 2 kings were never crowned, the boy King Edward V, who was murdered in the Tower of London, and Edward VIII, now the Duke of Windsor, who abdicated. The empire-wide celebration was an impressive mixture of medieval pageantry, display of fabulous treasures, and reverent solemnity. In the words of the Queen herself, the coronation was not a symbol of her power and splendor that are gone, but a declaration of our hopes of the future. An ancient ritual. Before the time of Christ, the Celtic tribes held their own coronations. After the death of a chief, a new leader was crowned with a cloth headband, given a spear for a sceptre, and enthroned by being seated on a shield and carried aloft on the shoulders of his supporters among the people, so that they might recognize him. Christianity flourished in England in 838 AD. To strengthen the loyalty of his subjects, Queen Elizabeth's historic ancestor, King Egbert of Wessex, made a treaty with the See of Canterbury, directing that his successors be consecrated by its archbishops. The first coronation held in Westminster Abbey was on Christmas Day 1066 AD. The abbey had been built by the Saxon, Edward the Confessor, who was later sainted. Ironically, his son, Harold, lost the Battle of Hastings to William the Conqueror, so it was the Norman William who came to be honored at the first Westminster coronation. This first coronation ended in a riot. When the Archbishop of York, the Archbishop of Canterbury, had fled to Scotland, asked, "Will ye have this man to be your king?" There was a confused shout of recognition in French and Saxon. The Norman cavalry, on guard outside, thinking the Saxons had revolted, charged the crowds, set fire to buildings and killed scores. Those at the ceremony fled to fight or hide, and William was crowned in haste in an almost empty abbey. King Edward's chair. Queen Elizabeth sat in King Edward's chair, the oldest piece of furniture in Westminster Abbey, to receive the crown that made her Queen of England. She was crowned over the stone of Scone, making her Queen of Scotland. According to legend, this is the very stone upon which Jacob, the patriarch of the Bible, laid his head when he dreamed of the ladder to heaven. How it got to Scotland, no one knows, but Scottish chiefs used it as their coronation seats even before Kenneth I, the first king of Scotland, took it to Scone, the capital of his kingdom, in 840 AD. Since that time no king could rule Scotland unless he were crowned on the stone of Scone. When Edward I conquered Scotland in 1297, he took his stone to Westminster Abbey and had a chair built to contain it, so that henceforth the kings of England would also rule Scotland. St. Edward's crown. At the coronation, Queen Elizabeth wore the golden crown of England, St. Edward's crown, for the only time in her entire reign. The heavy, solid gold crown will go back to the jewel room of the Tower of London until the next coronation. Made in 1660 for the crowning of Charles II, this crown is but a copy of a far older one. The original St. Edward's crown is believed to be the Saxon crown conferred on Alfred the Great by Pope Leo in 853 AD. This older crown was part of the insignia of royalty that Oliver Cromwell had melted down and sold after he had beheaded Charles I. The notorious Captain Blood stole St. Edward's crown and other crown jewels in 1671, but was captured just outside the Tower. His punishment, strange to say, was £500 a year for life in return for his promise to leave the British treasury alone. The Imperial State Crown. In 1838, another young queen was to be crowned. St. Edward's crown was not only too large and heavy for the 19-year-old Queen Victoria, but was the crown just for England. Queen Victoria was to rule an empire that embraced the world, so a fitting crown was designed for her. The Imperial State Crown, probably the most valuable single treasure in the world. This 39-oz crown graced Queen Elizabeth's head when she left the abbey after the coronation. Brilliantly resplendent with diamonds, rubies, emeralds, sapphires and pearls, over 3,000 in all. This crown boasts many famous jewels. Sapphires from the crown of Charles II and from the ring of Edward the Confessor, and pearls that once were the earrings of Elizabeth I are lost and overshadowed by such gems as the second star of Africa, 309 carats, and the blood red, black princess ruby, which is almost as large as a hen's egg and has a history of bloodshed, cruelty and treachery. The Ko E Noor Diamond. This famous diamond must be mentioned because it will never be worn in the crown of an English monarch. Called the Mountain of Light, this jewel was the greatest treasure of Asia, with an incredibly long history of murder and violence when it fell into the hands of the British East India Company. To end its troubled history, it was sent out of India, presented to Queen Victoria, but a vacuous curse followed it, warning that if it were ever worn in the crown of a monarch of England, India would be lost. The diamond is set in the crown of the late Dowager Queen Mary and is traditionally handed down on the female side of the royal line. The Coronation Regalia. The coronation of a ruler of England, a 900-year-old ritual, is filled with many priceless objects used to signify the royal and spiritual attributes of a monarch. She touches the golden spurs of chivalry, surrenders to God the sword to punish evildoers, is clasped by the bracelets of sincerity and wisdom, wears the royal robe of righteousness, receives the orb symbolizing Christ's dominion over the world, and with these and other regalia is dedicated to serving her people with the help of God. It is fitting that the scepter of the cross, the ensign of power and justice, should hold the great pear-shaped star of Africa, the world's largest cut diamond, 516 1.5 carats. It is equally fitting that the ampulla and announcing spoon, used for the most sacred part of the ceremony, should be the only two coronation pieces that escaped Cromwell's destruction. The first known use of these ancient golden pieces was in 1399 at the coronation of Henry IV. The royal family. Her Royal Highness Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary was born April the 21, 1926, first child of Albert Duke of York and third in the line of succession for the throne of England. Her sister Princess Margaret was born at Glamis Castle, Scotland, August 21, 1930. When Princess Elizabeth's grandfather, George V, died in 1936 and her uncle Edward VIII abdicated, her father became George VI, King of England, and she became the heiress presumptive. On November the 20th, in 1947, in solemn ceremony at Westminster Abbey, she married Philip Mountbatten, like herself a great-great-grandchild of Queen Victoria. Created a Duke of Edinburgh at the wedding, Philip was born a Prince of the Royal House of Greece and Denmark on June the 10th, in 1921. He is the nephew of Lord Louis Mountbatten of Burma fame. On November the 40th, in 1948, her first son and heir of the throne, Prince Charles Philip Arthur George, Duke of Cornwall, was born at Buckingham Palace. His admirable behavior at the coronation has led to public clamor to have him created Prince of Wales immediately. Prince Charles gained a sister, Princess Anne, born at Clarence House, August the 15th in 1950, while Princess Elizabeth was in Kenya, South Africa, on the first leg of a grand Commonwealth tour for her ailing father. She received word of his death. It was February the 5th in 1952. The king was dead. Long live the queen. The processions. On Coronation Day, in June the 2nd in 1953, they counted the times when the sun broke through the clouds. It was 3. In spite of drizzle, downpour and thunder showers, perhaps 5 million people lined the two procession routes. The first, starting at Buckingham Palace, went down the Mall through Admiralty Arch, along Northumberland Avenue, past Victoria Embankment to Parliament Square in Westminster Abbey. After the crowning, the procession proceeded up Whitehall onto Haymarket, turned onto Pall Mall to St. James Street, and then up Piccadilly to Hyde Park Corner, where it turned onto East Carriage Drive along Hyde Park, through the Marble Arch to Oxford Street, and then turning again at Oxford Circus, onto Regent St to Haymarket, and then back along the Mall to Buckingham Palace. This was the coronation to most. The military parading, the splendor of royal carriages, the long motor cars, the colorful guard regiments, the prancing cavalry horses, and above all the sight of the 192-year-old golden royal coach of state drawn by 8 grey horses and escorted by a duke, an earl, a field marshal, a major general, and 2 colonels of the guards. Countless loyal subjects and coronation guests will treasure for the rest of their lives a personal smile or acknowledging wave of the hand from the Queen of England or her royal consort. Preceding the Queen's coach to the Abbey and back to the palace again were magnificent processions headed by the Lord Mayor of London's procession, followed by the processions of the Speaker of the House of Commons, who rode in the oldest coach of the day, antedating the royal coach by 60 years. The members of the royal family, the representatives of over 70 foreign states, the 8 colonial rulers, including the only other queen of the empire, Her Majesty the Queen of Tonga, the 10 prime ministers, including the RT Hon Winston St. Churchill, who served under Queen Victoria, the princes and princesses of the royal blood, and the famous glass coach in which rode the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret. Magnificently trained troops from the far reaches of the empire, from South Africa to Hudson's Bay, from Borneo to Gibraltar, from the ages past to the present, the medieval yeomen of the guard, the Queen's bark master and the watermen, and the later Royal Air Force fly past. All these elements of the great Commonwealth displayed in procession a tapestry thread of magnificence, color, and excitement unparalleled in modern times. The ceremony at the Abbey, the pomp and pageantry behind her, Queen Elizabeth entered Westminster Abbey and walked down the long nave between galleries of the crimson and ermine-robed peers, heads of Commonwealth countries, ambassadors, statesmen and churchmen. The choir song, "I was glad when they said to me, we will go into the house of the Lord." Up the steps of the theatre, a raised platform built for the ceremony, past her throne to her chair of state below the royal gallery, she proceeded, there to kneel in private prayer. Then, in the ceremony of the recognition, she stood by King Edward's chair and faced, in turn, the 4 corners of the Packet Abbey, while the Archbishop at each corner of the theatre called out, "Sirs, I here present unto you Queen Elizabeth, your undoubted Queen. Wherefore all you who are come this day to do your homage and service, are you willing to do the same?" Each time the response was, "God save Queen Elizabeth." The Archbishop asked in part, "Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the peoples according to their respective laws and customs? Will you to owe your power cause law and justice in mercy to be executed in all your judgments? Will you maintain the laws of God and the true profession of the gospel?" The Queen's clear voice affirmed, "All this I promise to do." The Holy Bible was presented with these words, "Our gracious Queen, to keep your Majesty ever mindful of the law and the gospel of God as the rule for the whole life and government of Christian princes, we present you with this book, the most valuable thing that this world affords. Under a canopy of gold, clothed held by 4 knights of the Garter, Queen Elizabeth was anointed on the hands, breast and head. The Archbishop made a cross on her head with the holy oil, saying, "Be thy head anointed with holy oil, as kings, princes and prophets were anointed." She was presented with the spurs of nobility, then the sword of state, which she laid on the altar to pledge it to the service of God. After the delivery of the orb and the coronation ring, she received the scepter of the cross and the scepter with the dove, the rod of equity and mercy. After the crowning already described, Queen Elizabeth was escorted to the throne of England and at that moment formally took possession of her realms. The Archbishop was the first to pay homage. Then her husband knelt at her feet, pledging, "I, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, do become your liege man of life and limb, and of earthly worship, and faith and truth I will bear unto you, to live and die against all manner of folks, so help me God." After the homage of the others had been paid, the newly crowned Queen and Philip knelt through the communion service. Then, with the choir singing and the organ filling the abbey with the mighty strains of the national anthem, Queen Elizabeth II of England, regally robed, carrying all the outward symbols of royalty and all the inward graces bestowed by the blessings of God, and of her people, left the abbey, bearing the hopes of her 600 million subjects. We want to add new videos every day, so please subscribe to our channel.
And if you had fun, thumbs up